Morbius, operated by the electromagnetic impulses of individual Krell brains.
To what purpose?
In return, that ultimate machine would instantaneously project solid matter to any point on the planet, in any shape or color they might imagine, for any purpose, Morbius. Creation by mere thought.
Why haven't I seen this all along?
Let the movie speak.
Welcome, Earthlings. This is a brand new, shiny Cold War era episode of Let the Movie Speak. My name is Travis.
And I am Justin.
Captain Justin of the spacecraft. What is it called in this? ND?
C-57D.
Yeah. Such a really, it just rolls off the tongue.
It rolls off, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That's, when Chevy unleashed the Corvette, and they
Yes.
were like, we're going to call it the C-57D. And everyone went, that's actually a stupid name. So let's call it the Corvette.
Is that the model of a typewriter or a fax machine? Those two things
Yeah.
don't belong in the same
Right.
joke. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a sci-fi movie. Pew pew blasters and aliens and such. Well, aliens, kind of.
No, sort of.
Yeah. Kind of disappointingly few aliens, in my opinion.
Few of many things.
Yeah. So we're talking about Forbidden Planet today. The Forbidden Planet. No, just Forbidden Planet. Drop the from 1950s.
Well, it is it's the only one. So.
It is. That's true. You know, Justin, I once saw a stage play called Return to the Forbidden Planet, and it had spacey, like kind of Star Trek-y stuff in it, and Shakespearean dialogue, and musical numbers from like the 60s. Like, you know that song Gloria?
Wow.
Gloria, that one. Yeah. So it was weird, and it kind of makes sense to me more now that I've seen this. A couple of those things, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever?
I'm happy for you.
Well, you know, I am too. I'm also happy for me.
Good.
I'm happy to be
Good.
here discussing this movie, for better or for worse, with you,
Yeah.
buddy.
For worse in this case.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Before we get there and we talk to Robbie the robot and the other people, let's talk about what we watched this week. Okay, Justin. So I think we can tag team one of the what did we watch this week's
Okay.
this week.
Let's do it.
Yeah, because I watched the first episode of a series that I had been seeing some buzz about on, Twitter and other places. People are saying things like, "You will not believe what happens next in this show. Like, you could not possibly predict what happens."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What? This is a comedy show. Like, what are you talking about?" So I put it on, and it's called The Rehearsal with Nathan Fielder. I had already watched a few episodes of. Have you ever seen Nathan Fielder For You, Justin? His other show?
No, I have not.
Yeah, that's really funny and worth watching too. It's similar, but not nearly as bombastic in its conceit, I would say. He just like goes and like does someone's job with them for a day, but he's just really ridiculous and funny. The Rehearsal, on the other hand, Justin, this is something different, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is different. It's an exciting time, I think, to be a comedy creator.
Yeah.
I feel like comedians benefit. They're maybe one of the biggest winners of kind of the streaming extravaganza
Yeah.
that we're witnessing, where this show is never going to get a network. I mean, I don't even think Comedy Central would put some money behind this,
Not
to, like,
this
air on
much
their
money.
channel.
No, not in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work unless it's at the scope that it is at, and he had to go to HBO to get it.
No, this is, if you haven't seen it, the at least the concept of the first episode is that Nathan Fielder is going to help this guy who wants to potentially tell the truth to a close friend that he has lied to for many years about his academic credentials.
yeah, about not the most important thing in the world, but it's a big deal to him.
And the way that he does that in the show's conceit is that he recreates the person that he is going to try to help. He recreates their home so he can practice having conversations with that guy before he meets him.
Yeah.
And then he recreates the restaurant where the guy he's trying to help is going to meet his friend.
Yes.
So that they can practice, including with like working staff and pizza and so yeah. It's,
and then he recreates the friend.
He does recreate the friend.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. It is a blast, and we talked about this before. I don't think it really matters if this thing is entirely scripted. In fact, I think it probably is.
Yeah, I'm
but,
on the fence at times, but
yeah,
you're watching it and like this show's been out for a while, so I don't care about like spoiling the quote unquote twists and turns of the first episode. Right. I'm sure every episode is full of those insane like let's rewind the tape and I'll show you what really happened kind of moments,
Right.
But the minute they get to the restaurant that they've built on this soundstage, I was like, this man is insane. Like this guy's nuts. And I don't, again, whether it's scripted or not, they did in fact build that set, which is, I'm sure aping a real restaurant. It's just like, it's crazy.
Well, but you never see for sure. I mean, it's shot pretty carefully, but you never see the inside of the, to me, it's unclear if they've clearly built a set. All right. I'm not trying to say that's a deep fake or something.
Yeah.
But it's not clear to me that the one location does not double for both. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I find that we have fallen into the pitfall that we were once criticizing. Is it real or is it not real? I think you're right, and it doesn't matter. It's hilarious.
Okay. I'm sorry. No. I led us into the pit, Travis.
I think I did too. I think we complete each other, and we both held hands and jumped into the pit, and we shouldn't do that.
That's a beautiful, and there's lots of tar in here.
Yeah,
I don't know who did that.
Yeah, I like a good pit, but I'm not a big fan of tar.
I'm not a great big fan of tar. I think though that the show ends on such a beautiful note. It's much more poignant than most other creators, especially in the genre, would go for.
I think so too. Yeah.
And so that to me is what makes it really exciting, because it's very hard to even just call this like, oh, this is Nathan Fielder's new comedy show.
Yeah.
I feel like that sells him a little short, because this is pretty ambitious and this is pretty far-reaching.
Yeah,
it's more of. Did you say it was like an experience?
Oh, for the love! I told you when I like recommended it. I was like, I want you to watch this. I watched it with my wife Morgan, and she just kept looking at me like, why are you still watching this? Because it's so incredibly uncomfortable by design.
Right.
So if that's the kind of humor that absolutely repels you, then stay far away from this show.
So you could have that reaction, or you could have the reaction where you're interested in it, like us weirdos.
Yeah.
Or my wife Kelsey watched it with me, and she came away saying, well, I didn't like find it super funny, but I found it very relaxing to watch, like something I would watch before I went to bed. So she kind of enjoyed it,
I do not understand that reaction at all, not even one iota. But hey, if it's relaxing for her, then by all means,
by all means,
forget the Kenny G. Just pop on an episode of The Rehearsal.
There you go.
Yeah.
That puts most people to sleep, right? Well, speaking of going to sleep, Travis, how would you like to spend 367 days in a spacecraft journeying faster than the speed of light towards Altair 4?
I would, Justin, there's nothing I would like more. So it's 1956, and we have, I believe, one of the very first big budget, widescreen color sci-fi adventure movies to hit theaters in the form of Forbidden Planet. And Justin, this comes out of, funnily enough, the same studio that made Singin' in the Rain, which we just reviewed. And another film that you may have heard of called The Wizard of Oz. And
Wizard of
yeah,
doesn't sound familiar.
Toto, Dorothy,
No,
Scarecrow.
we'll have to do an episode on it sometime.
Yeah,
Doesn't ring any bells.
Check it out. It is. It's one of those like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks kind of tent pole. Like they wanted to make their money back, and then some, and then some, and then some. So that's what this movie was intended to be. And I think for that reason, we're gonna have plenty of interesting conversation about the spectacle of it all, and certainly. All the stuff in between the spectacle, like the dialogue and the story and characters.
Story and characters.
Yes,
huh?
This movie does have them. Yeah, I'll remind you
Did
what
we
they
watch
are
the
later.
same movie?
Yeah, fair enough. But another man, you could argue, some do, Justin, some argue that another man is responsible, other than Fred Wilcox, the director, and the guys credited for the screenplay. His name is William Shakespeare. And this is loosely based on The Tempest by William Shakespeare.
Supposedly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my takeaway from that is that you remember in Breaking Bad, there's that episode Ozymandias.
Oh, yeah.
And so, the corollary there, even if all you had was the title, is that like Ozymandias, one day no one's going to remember Walter. It's not going to matter.
Sure.
He
fell.
All this.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But does that mean, even though there's an episode called Ozymandias, and even though the show makes a through line between those two things,
Sure.
I don't think anyone in their right mind would say Breaking Bad is an adaptation of Ozymandias.
Yeah.
Like they share maybe some similarities that even the show references, but that does not make it an adaptation. I would say this, to me, Forbidden Planet and The Tempest share a very similar relationship.
Yeah,
where you might see some very general, big brushstroke similarities, like guy lives alone with his daughter. Yeah. And that's about it. All that crap about trying to make Robbie the robot, Ariel the spirit, it's like, no. It's just
Robbie the robot is a direct carryover from The Tempest, though. You're forgetting that.
Shakespeare was so ahead of his time.
Ahead of his time, yeah.
Yeah. Some people think Shakespeare is still alive today, and he is the robot.
Yeah. Well, let's not. We can't.
That's on the next episode of The Rehearsal.
We can't know, Justin. We cannot know.
We can't know. That's right. We can't even know if he wrote his own plays, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So I find that a little. I feel like that might unfortunately come from maybe some camps that want to give this movie more importance and more credence or value or something than it actually has,
or just like value it for things that it doesn't. Who cares? Like you can look at it as an influential film, which it is,
sure.
in certain respects, and not oversell the elements that have no business being oversold.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and I don't know if this it bears saying, Travis, but I just want to lay it out, at least for myself, that our intention whenever, even if we watch a movie like today, I don't know if you've picked up or not yet, but we did not love Forbidden Planet.
Yeah.
In fact, we disliked it.
Yes.
However, that doesn't mean we don't want to be honest about it, right? Like we want to be aware enough of our own biases that we can kind of check those at the door and go, you know what, that's just kind of a me thing. But really, this movie is good in this way or that way. So there are definitely things, especially visually, we want to be honest and objective about and give this movie credit for. But at the same time, I think it's important to be honest and objective, and where the movie, especially with the question of what's it saying, if it fails to really say anything and that is confused or it says very little, I feel like that is our duty, Travis. We can't be derelict in our duty to let the people know.
No question. So we're gonna do our best, folks, and we're gonna try to have some fun because they can't all be winners, folks. And so let's just lastly acknowledge that this did win an Academy Award, and you might guess what it's for, Justin.
Best screenplay.
No, actually,
to William Shakespeare.
Yeah, Zombie Shakespeare accepted the award. Oh no, I'm sorry, he's still alive, and Robbie the robot.
Robbie.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I say it won an Oscar, what I mean to say is it didn't, and it was nominated for one because I apparently can't read.
Okay.
It was nominated for Best Effects, and it's 1957 for the ceremonies for the 56th year. Do you have any clue what won Best Visual Effects that year over Forbidden Planet, Justin?
No, but I'm really just inching away my buttocks from my seat so that I can be the first to receive this information.
It was a little movie called The Ten Commandments.
There were some powerful visuals in there, but that's very interesting.
Weird stuff too. You know what I mean? Like as someone who appreciates the Ten Commandments, but certainly sees it as a Hollywood product.
Right.
There's some really kind of crazy effects in the Ten Commandments. So that's basically the background, folks. It is, I would say it's weirdly enough, not one of those space racy stories. You know what I mean? It's not like the Twilight Zone episodes that are really like a thinly veiled allegory for the Cold War, but the whole idea of like, let's explore space, and it's just on the mind of everyone in pop culture. That's certainly here. Well, let's try, Justin, to get in our little UFO and zip on over to Altair 4 and figure out what's it saying. I think you might be able to, in a reasonable amount of time here, sum up the plot of this thing, Justin. Why don't you give it a whirl?
Okay, yeah, let's see. We've got about 12 guys that get on a spacecraft that we've already talked about, has a very clunky name, like a new model of a toilet plunger, and they sail really, really fast over to Altair 4 because they're trying to find out, hey, does anyone still here alive? They land on the planet, they find a guy, his daughter, and his robot, and everyone tries to kiss the daughter, and then something starts killing the people on the ship, and then they realize that it's actually the professor who has harnessed some kind of technology that allows his subconscious to kill people. Yeah. And then they blow up the planet.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You got it. So the it's I don't want to call it simple because you just said a lot of things, but it is dumb. The story is dumb, and I think that's fair to say. I think old Bill Shakespeare would agree that perhaps if this is inspired by elements of The Tempest and not a straight adaptation, which it's not, none of the real substance of a story like that was carried over because this is a popcorn movie. It's a spectacle, and it's the selling point on this thing was in fact the costuming, the set design, all the effects, and the fact that it was in widescreen and in color, which was like amazing to people because you had some huge color films before. MGM, in fact, right? Singing in the Rain, Wizard of Oz, just a couple of those. But like widescreen was not the norm, and so to see it in scope like this.
CinemaScope.
Yeah, CinemaScope, which is just a proprietary way of saying widescreen, or whatever. Like every studio, every film, technique or camera or whatever. I don't even really know how that works, but there's a bunch of different ways of saying widescreen. There's different ratios, and if you want to nerd out about that, you can read a Quentin Tarantino interview sometime. Because he's crazy. But I think it's safe to say, like you said, Justin, like this movie deserves to be a punching bag at times, but at the same time, like I'm not looking at this thinking, why did this not strive to be something, on the level of Shakespeare or something? You know what I mean? Like it's right. I don't think in the end they ever wanted to go that far with the story.
People want to say, well, this is just the way that this movie, this era of filmmaking was. They had we can't judge it by the Quentin Tarantino standard. He wasn't around. Okay, fair enough. I get it. Some things have changed, but as hopefully if you've listened to any other episodes of our show, there has been from the 30s where we started chronologically, there has been plenty of cases of people that are truly using the art of film to say things profoundly and to say things beautifully. Mm-hmm. And this movie doesn't even try to do either, which I'm okay with, but it just kind of throws like some weird Freudian stuff and words like atomic fission on top, as if like that elevates things automatically, or that makes it, oh, I see, this is for adults, this is, oh, I see. But it just doesn't stick, because all that stuff, this movie to me is just all a bunch of spaghetti sauce over rotten spaghetti noodles, Travis.
No question.
And as soon as you try to take the first bite, I'm sending it back.
I'm trying to picture the restaurant.
How do you segue?
No. I'm trying to picture the restaurant where they would bring you a plate and not realize the spaghetti noodles were rotten and the sauce was rotten. Oh, how did we possibly make this mistake?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I gave him a bad Yelp review, okay?
Yeah,
gave him 2 stars.
They deserved it. Thanks a lot, Olive Garden. Oh, there goes another sponsor. Okay, well, we've lost Olive Garden.
Oh, jeez.
We'll have to try to pick up Buca de Beppo or something. Okay, so what other things actually happen in this movie that are worth talking about? Well, the guys in the saucer, which, okay, one thing that's interesting, and I did watch a short documentary, which is sort of this, like, many years later, we look back at how the Forbidden Planet influenced, cinema or whatever. And it was totally worth the 20 minutes or whatever, because it had some really cool talking head interviews with famous directors like, John Landis and Joe Dante and John Carpenter, all these like genre guys who a little bit later in the late 70s and 80s would become like, they're sort of doing this same kind of thing. You think, Gremlins and American Werewolf in London and John Carpenter's Everything, essentially. They're doing better versions of this, kind of popcorny genre fare, excuse me. And
it does have flair on occasion.
It's got flair. I mean, just look at those spacesuits. You're going to see those spacesuits here, and you're going to see them in the Time Machine, I think.
The Time Machine, yeah.
And on episodes of the Twilight Zone too. They reused a lot.
Yeah, you see parts of Robbie the Robot on the Twilight Zone too.
And the ship, apparently, Justin, I was reading up on some of the nerdy behind the scenes stuff, and that ship pops up in some Twilight Zone episodes, and folks, just bear with us for a moment. If you're listening, I'm sure you have patience, because we are who we are. But we are big Twilight Zone fans, and so Justin, I want to name some of these episodes and see if you can remember where this spaceship popped up in the past. One of them is Third from the Sun. I'm trying to remember.
Oh yeah, remember that one?
Is that first season? I think maybe.
Isn't that where everything grows cold, but it's really getting hot?
No, that's the Midnight Sun, I think.
You're right.
That's not a spacey one. Okay, Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Everybody knows that one. I guess it's in there. And then The Invaders. That one does not ring a bell for me.
Is that the one where the woman is all alone in her... wouldn't it be awesome if I just guessed completely wrong for each one of these?
Oh, if we could get like all the Twilight Zone nerds to comment on our Instagram post because we were wrong about everything. Hey, clicks are clicks, baby.
Clicks are clicks. But I think it's about an old lady that lives like in a cabin. It looks like the Old West or something.
Oh.
But then and she like beats these miniature spacemen, but then in the end you realize the miniature spacemen are Americans.
You are correct. When a woman investigates a clamor on the roof of her rural house, she discovers a small UFO and little aliens emerging from it. Yeah, it's not a great episode. To Serve Man, that's a great one, I think.
Oh, it's good.
It's really good.
It's a cookbook.
Yeah, really good. Hocus Pocus and Frisbee. That's a weird name, but I do not remember that episode. Oh, the gas station attendant. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's the guy who works at a gas station who's like telling stories. Yeah. And then Death Ship from 1963. That's probably in the hour-long season. That's not as good. And then On Thursday, We Leave for Home. So some of those are big name Twilight Zone episodes. So why are we talking about this? Well, the one thing, Justin, that this movie has that is worth talking about, okay? And we will talk about some of the things that are not worth talking about too. But the one thing that I think maybe it should be remembered for, its influence is significant, is the visuals, right? Like this movie is from 1956, and it's got some groundbreaking stuff in it, some really ambitious stuff. And like, frankly, for a movie that I'm watching and just sort of, kind of rolling my eyes at and hoping was better in the script, maybe, I'm kind of blown away by how good the effects look from time to time. The ship is one of those. I mean, the miniature work on that thing when it like flies through space and comes in and lands and everything. You might make the assumption that every space movie from the 50s is like totally hokey and ridiculous. And in many ways, this one is. But really, it's just in the narrative, right? Like just in the story.
Right.
If this had a really killer like story with amazing themes and super good performances and all that, I don't know. I feel like the visuals would back it up, which is why, you know, you said, Justin, that this thing takes itself seriously or something. But like, yeah, I mean, Anne Francis in an interview in that documentary I watched, she specifically said, like, the first day we came on set, we all just decided, and the director told us, like, this is a serious picture. We're going to take this seriously. And as much as the movie kind of whiffs it, they did, and you can see that in the performances, but also in the prop design, the map paintings, all of those. Nothing's digital, right? But animated visuals and composite stuff. So I don't know. We should probably spend a little bit of time talking about how specifically this influence gets carried over into other films and series and stuff. But what do you have to say about the mark that this left in the effects and visual department?
I think it's indelible. And the movie does deserve all kinds of credit, because I imagine young George Lucas watching this, and this being, I know that he quotes like, Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon in some of those, more well-known interviews about, how'd you ever think of Star Wars, George?
Yeah, it's always like Kurosawa and Buck Rogers, I think, are the two that always get mentioned.
But I mean, if you've seen any of Buck Rogers, I don't really recommend doing that, but you could. And to compare it with this, I mean, I see so much of Star Wars from here, right? Robbie the Robot is a robot that actually seems like the sort of grandfather sort of figure of how did we get from robots just being like random like buckets or something to characters like C-3PO and R2-D2.
I mean, he talks. He speaks,
exactly. And he even has that line like C-3PO about like, I am versed in 160 languages and there's subdialects and stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, that is, I mean, C-3PO, that line has been perfected a bit more, or at least more iconic, because it's so culturally
well,
known.
I mean, it's couched and contextualized in something that just absolutely knows what it's doing, it's just better. Hey guys, Star Wars is better than this.
Yeah, wow, that's a news flash, right?
Yeah, sorry guys.
I mean, so yes, the visuals are amazing, and I think we can see this movie and go, wow. I mean, it is surprising to me, right? Because I don't live in 1956.
Yeah.
So I'm sure in 1956, honestly, a lot of this stuff had to be freaking amazing to see on the screen. Just like, how did they do that? It looks so good. And so today, I'm like you, some of the miniature work is like, wow, that doesn't look corny at all. It just looks like good miniature work, you know? Or even when the monster kind of creature, which we'll get into, is like trying to come through the force field. I know that's like mostly animated, but it still looks good.
It looks really
it's not
cool.
Like, it's not stupid looking.
Yeah.
And so I see that again. Like someone like George Lucas takes his inspiration from this movie visually, but like what George. This is not like Star Wars versus this movie, but I think why Star Wars is so much more renowned is because it actually invests itself completely in, at least the original trilogy, invests itself completely in complete and holistic world building.
Yeah.
Right? Where this movie just kind of like slaps the spaghetti sauce on. Like, we'll make a super expensive robot, and does anything live on this planet? I don't know that we have the budget for it, and not really important, right?
Yeah.
And so
I mean, there's a few deer and a tiger and that kind of thing, but
you mean the tiger that gets vaporized? In midair.
Yeah. Well, that's what should happen to all tigers, but that's another podcast.
I'm reporting you to PETA.
Okay, you name drop Star Wars. We're talking about visuals and what carried over. I would just like to quickly go through the things that this is not just pontificating. So like if you're wondering if we're like, oh, this takes place in space and so does Star Wars. No. We're like specifics, right? Like you mentioned Robbie the Robot being a more sophisticated, suit prop thing overall design, and some slight personality here and there, not nearly as much as something like C-3PO or even R2-D2 who just beeps and boops. But like, these are the things that I noticed, Justin, and let me know if you caught these as well. First, the title card, right? Like the title card looks a little bit like the opening crawl to Star Wars as it kind of comes forward. They say hyperdrive, which is like, I don't know, that's probably just thrown around in like sci-fi stuff here and there, but like, I'm pretty sure we didn't have people talking about the hyperdrive and hyperspeed and whatever in like 10 other movies before this. And this is, the opening ship shots through space altogether. I mean, it's the same technology they were going to use 20, ish years later with Star Wars. Again, it's just perfected or whatever. And then the stuff in this ship, right? Justin, did any of that remind you of like the kind of analog looking Rebel technology, like their graphs and maps, and it's all like plexiglass domes and boxes and stuff.
Well, and I know you're on Star Wars, so I don't want to totally derail us, but this might be a better point just to take a quick segue before we zip back to Star Wars.
Yeah.
In the spaceship, there's like, if you don't see Star Trek in the ship too, it's like, what's happening when they're coming out of hyperspace and they're like, let's all stand here like this when we get beamed up. I mean,
I did not understand what was happening at one iota in that moment. I thought they were going to teleport
Travis,
down to the surface.
Honestly, I don't know for sure, but the way that I took that was that it's a really rough process coming out of faster than light speed.
Right.
I've only been at light speed, so I can't comment on faster than light speed.
Sure.
But when you come out of that, it's like you can't just like sit down and buckle your seatbelt. You need to go in your little like special standy place and turn completely blue, and then you're gonna feel a little hot afterwards. Yeah. But that's okay, because you're gonna get used to it.
You're
It'll
fine.
be okay.
Well, and like, what is the alternative, right? Like they slam up against the space windshield if they slow down too quickly. Like
that would be awesome.
I think again, like some of this stuff is overthought. The technological jargon that this movie throws at you just left and right is complete, utter like word salad. It's nonsense.
Yes, like when they're trying to essentially make a transmitter, right? Like you couldn't just use like any radio terms.
No,
it's like,
no.
How about we get the Galapagos out here?
Yeah.
It's like, I thought that was an island. No, Skipper.
Yeah.
It's not an island, you moron. This will go to the trunficulator, and then I'll hook it up to the air conditioning, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Oh, make sure we put that back in the core modulator, or we won't be able to get back home. It's like, what? Come on. Like, I mean,
it's too much.
It's too much.
No, you're right, because the audience can't connect to any of that, right?
No.
And again, that's something that Star Wars did, okay? Where like, I wonder if Star Wars took that, like George in particular took that and went like, how can I appreciate they're trying to tell me like these are real things. It's not just magic keeping this stuff up, but how do we convince the audience in like a fun way? Like it doesn't matter what this thing is called.
Well, in the same way that it does that, like George Lucas just like, let's just put these things on the table from a world building perspective. Let's just put them on the table, and like they are real in this world. We don't need to explain why they're real. We don't need to talk about why the hyperdrives need this thing. Like they do like at the smallest amount of that in Star Wars, and then never enough to bore you. And in this, it's the same thing with the slowing down from light speed, right? It's like in Star Wars, what do they do when they slow down from light speed? They pull a lever and then they slow down from light speed, and then everybody's fine. Like nobody cares about the beam of light that you can't explain, like because there's no way to connect to it. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Star Wars and Star Trek both. Like you look at the suits in this, and again, where Star Wars goes to the like kind of weird, gritty, somewhat dilapidated, like everything's falling apart in Star Wars for some reason, until you get to the prequels and everything's too shiny. And in Star Trek, it's kind of the opposite, right? Like everything is very buttoned down and weirdly uniform, like this movie, So there's those things. There's two moons, which I'm sure is just a reality of being on a certain planet and looking up into the sky. But like two moons and two suns, you can't really deny the visual parallel there. They call it out in the movie. They're like, oh, it's still weird to see two moons in the sky. That's a thing. But the biggest one to me, Justin, and one of the most impressive that this movie has to offer is when they get down into the belly of the Krell technology. And the Krell are this alien race that lived on Altair 4 that you never see, but they're only spoken of. And oh man, are they spoken of. They just talk about the Krell over and over and over again. But anyway, you get down into their like giant, vast storehouses of technology. And I don't know, they almost look like hydroelectric dam technology, which makes sense to me for the 50s, right? That would be a little bit of something that someone could attach to reality. But the overhead shot, right, of like the bridge and the giant pylons with like electrical stuff shooting, that looks like so much like the thing that, you know, Palpatine gets thrown into and fried at the end of Return of the Jedi, you know?
Right.
So these are significant and specific influences that you're right. This movie does deserve credit for. What else? Before we maybe go to some of the less savory bits of the movie to talk about, Justin.
I mean, I think what the movie wants to do, what it really tried to do, right? And so, again, I don't want to be too unfair to this movie because just to ask somebody that's never done, you know, like people weren't churning out the Forbidden Planet kind of movies all the time, at least at this scale and this scope, and in some ways with this kind of ambition, right? At least talking about visually.
Yeah.
And so it does deserve credit for really trying to push those boundaries, I think. And so I get the impression that became so much of the focus, though, that as we start talking about the story now, I think it becomes very clear that even though that may have been the intention of all the cast and crew, hey, we need to make a serious movie.
Yeah.
You don't just, like, saying it doesn't make it happen.
Yeah,
you got to put in the work. You got to have the foundation for it.
Yeah.
And this movie doesn't really have that.
Yeah.
And I think that for me that becomes really apparent. I mean, if it wasn't apparent when they look like they're being beamed up, but they're just actually putting on the parking brake on their spacecraft, it becomes really apparent when they encounter the Doctor and Dr. Morbius and his daughter, Altera, not Altair 4. Don't get those confused, okay? You're an idiot.
Yeah, well, they could have picked any name, and yet they picked the one that sounds like the only other thing. You know what I mean? Like the only other space name here, like, is Altair. Shoot, now I got them mixed up. Dang it,
Altair
movie.
4.
Yeah, and then her name is Altera, and sometimes they just call her Alta, and it's like, like you're designing this in a way to specifically confuse the audience.
It's just that when she shows up, 1956 again, and if you're seeing this, I think I made a joke about in our Singing in the Rain episode, Travis, you know, or a comment about how it definitely in the musicals of this era, when, you know, women come out, you're going to see all leg, right?
Yep.
For some reason, this is not a musical. Thank goodness. I don't think that would have solved the problem here.
Might have been more fun, but yeah, go ahead.
It would have been potentially more. Well, no, it wouldn't. Okay, before we get to Altera, here's why that would not have been fun. Okay, watching the intro credits, this movie did not list someone that was a composer. It listed musical tonalities by Beebe and Louis Barron. And I thought, so I like music. And I thought, wow, are they just like so against electronic music that they won't even call it that? Like, that seems kind of harsh.
Yeah.
But holy crap, Travis, listening to this stuff is like, I watch this with my kids, right? And one of my daughters is like, like just during the intro, the credits, she's like, I don't like that sound. It kind of hurts my ears, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it kind of hurts mine too.
Yeah.
And honestly, the mix, I don't know if it's just the version I watched, Travis, but the mix is not amazing.
No.
Because when that score comes in, it's hard to hear anyone like clearly.
You're calling it a score though, Justin, and
it's not a score. I'm sorry, it's not a score. I retract that. It is just sound.
It is just sound. And this is one of my biggest beefs with this movie. If you had just like I just complained about this, right? I just talked about High Noon being overscored, you know, a couple episodes ago. And we were like, you know, some 50s movies, they just kind of go crazy with the score and it's a little distracting. I wish this had a bombastic full orchestra, like, you know,
totally
like Buck Rogers level. Cause
we're in space.
Yeah.
Why not?
But that is part of this, you know, cast and crew and director's philosophy. We are taking this thing seriously. So this is, I know a little bit of the backstory because I listened to one of the, not composers, tonality people, whatever they're called, in that documentary. And this is how it's recounted in the documentary, Justin. I was fascinated by this. they're like, okay, so we were hired, me and this guy, this lady who did the music tonality beat boops. They should have just credited as the beat boop orchestrators.
The Beat Boop Band.
They're like, we were hired to do the sound effects for this movie. Okay, makes sense. They need beat boops. They're in space, totally. And then we sent them in what we had so far, and they were just blown away by this stuff. And they gave us the entire score to the movie. And this stuff was all made, all of these sounds for this, score or soundtrack or whatever you want to call it, they were all made with weird, like pieced together analog, like synthesized, like literal vacuum tubes and valves and crazy weird circuits and stuff like that. That is what you're hearing, right? And so they talk about like this was incredibly difficult to produce all of this for the movie because it was never done before. It's the first fully electronic score for a movie. This is how it's being spoken about. And I'm just sitting there like, this sucks. There's nothing about this that makes this movie better. It's super confusing because you're watching the movie and it doesn't sound like music. Like I know what music is, and this is just like it's not even like pitches a lot of the time. It's just literal like beep boop sounds.
What you did was more musical than anything I heard.
Yeah,
in
well,
this film.
I can't help myself, Justin. I'm a musical genius.
You're just a genius, Travis. No, I agree, man. This honestly, just hearing that stuff after a while, at first, during the intro, even though it's super loud and just bizarre, I thought like, okay, I guess they're just trying to set the stage and let me know this is going to be like something new, right? Whatever, you get a pass on that.
Sure.
But an hour into the movie, like it's worn off. It wore off like after the credits. Okay.
It's so annoying. It is so annoying.
It just pisses me off because I can't even hear Leslie Nielsen talk without.
Yeah.
It's like it's not good to hear. So I don't really. It's unfortunate that it was so hard to produce because. It's very easy just to put the freaking movie on mute if you're watching it at your own home.
Yeah.
And like, it's not fun. And honestly, I don't think that did anything to like further electronic music.
No.
And I know this is not a musical podcast.
Yeah.
But like I'm a big George Harrison fan. So
Sure.
I had a lot of his albums from all the Apple years. And like one of his first albums was just electronic sounds on like the first Moog. And it's terrible because it's just him messing around, dude. I don't even know why it's an album, right? But like, okay, so why I bring that up just to say, just because you're trying something new, it doesn't make it good. It just makes it a novelty at best.
Yeah.
And this is not even that.
No.
It's a pissity because it just makes me angry.
Okay, and about the credit, before we move on, because there's nothing else to say about the music in this movie.
Lowercase m.
The credit was a legality issue, like because neither of these people were like composers in a why can't I think of the word, a union?
Oh,
right?
the union.
Yeah, because they were not musical people. These were not people who were like, oh, we're musicians who are trying something experimental. No. These were two sound effects nerds who decided we were going to try to make something like music out of these electronic things. And that's why they don't get a composer credit, because they're not composers. Oh man.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But okay.
ridiculous.
So I was starting to talk about, poor Altera. Played by Anne
Let's
Francis.
get to her, because the movie certainly does from time to time, when it feels like it.
Yeah. So Altera shows up and is the only female in this movie. And you know what? I don't find that like on its premise, right? If you're telling me this is a movie about a naval men going through in their spacecraft to a planet to figure out what's going on, and all they find is a doctor and his daughter for humans. Okay, I get like that. That's not like a knock against this movie.
No,
I'm not asking
Justin,
why
it's
half of
the
the cast
Tempest,
wasn't.
Justin. It's the Tempest. That's why
It's right. Okay, thank you, Travis. Yeah, bringing us back to reality. And there's Bill Shakespeare knocking on our door again. So she shows up, and she is. I don't even know if it's appropriate to call it a miniskirt.
Yeah, it's a miniskirt. Yeah, it's like what would become popular in the '60s with boots, like high boots and short skirt kind of look.
But wait a minute. Okay, you're talking about the go-go stuff.
Yeah,
And that reminds me. I was at the Buffalo Bill Museum one time.
Uh-huh.
This is in Colorado, and it was excellent. But there was also these elderly people that were around there. And so we were walking around, like the museum is really cool inside, but outside you can actually go and look at Buffalo Bill's grave, and there's a beautiful scenic viewpoint. And so I'm looking for Buffalo Bill's grave, and it's kind of cool. There's kind of a somber environment, but kind of beautiful. Makes you think about your, mortality, all that cool stuff that kids love talking about. But I hear these people like come. It's kind of far away, and it's getting closer and closer, and I just hear, "Go boots." She's got go-go boots. And it's these like 3 elderly people, and this elderly woman's just going on and on about how one person is wearing go-go boots. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot be out here anymore. And so I went inside the museum, and they followed me inside, and they kept like loudly shouting about go-go boots. And like, these weren't mentally incapacitated people. They were just super passionate about go-go boots.
Yeah.
Anyway. You brought that up. You brought that memory flooding back to me, Travis.
Hey, that memory was better than any single scene in this movie, as far as I'm concerned.
So, okay, but here's why I'm suggesting that Altera is not wearing a miniskirt.
Okay.
Because I do agree, it has that shape, but did you notice when she's like petting the deer, she like can't even bend over?
Yeah.
Because that would just reveal anything and everything.
Yeah, of course.
It would become like a crop top very shortly.
Yeah.
So it's weird because this movie is saying, this is serious, folks. Let's take this seriously. Hey, what kind of skimpy outfit could we put the one female in this movie in? And it's like, immediately that takes the seriousness away, right? Because I think it's one thing to try to portray someone as like, oh, this is the beautiful character, or
Sure.
there's a gazillion ways to do that.
Yeah, well, it's like how the character's used too, right? I mean, the clothes are one thing.
Exactly.
Right? The clothes are one thing. And like one point I'd like to make about this is it does that thing that just kind of pisses me off more than if they were to do nothing, which is it makes this really wimpy, half-hearted swing at an idea, right? And that idea is, she is like Eve in the Garden of Eden or something, right? Because she's like literally out in the greenery, like communing with animals she shouldn't be communing with, as far as we're concerned. And, like the clothing, she literally says, like, what's wrong with my clothes is so there's a world in which this movie exists, and she's dressed a certain way that we look at and we say, like, okay, this is provocative or something, right? And the movie is trying to say something interesting about that. It's not just doing it because it's a popcorn movie and this might make the guys in the audience happy or whatever. But this movie's just like not even remotely interested in that. It's just not. And so the way the character's used is the telltale sign. And the way she's used is she's used, man. Like she shows up in the movie, and all of these dudes who, literally it's like the dumb jokes you hear about like sailors at sea when they come back to to port or whatever. They're just like fawning all over her, and not just fawning all over her, but like they're making passes, man. They're kissing her, and she doesn't even know what that means because she has this wonderfully little feature, Justin. This little quirk, which is total built-in ignorance to all things humanity. And so like we always talk about characters not having agency. It's like, oh my gosh, they have set this up so that she is just like so ignorant to everything that like guys are kissing her and like quote unquote falling in love with her, and like it's just so, I don't even want to talk about it anymore unless you want to. It's gross, it's just gross. And
because they don't treat her as a real character, right?
No,
because I agree. What ticks me off, we're so angry about this movie. Let it go, guys.
All the beep boops, they make me so mad.
It's just a bummer that it would be super interesting if they played her as like, okay, let's really imagine that somebody was all alone. She's the only woman, right? And she's only known her father. Those are the only people she's experienced her whole life. Okay, that's super interesting. What would she be like when she grows up and she suddenly meets other people?
Right.
In my mind, it's like there's a couple ways you could go with that, but any way would probably be some variation, if you're being honest anyway, with like just total social ineptitude.
Yeah.
Not so much naivety, right? Maybe the movie is trying to say like, no, she's just so innocent, she has no clue.
Yeah. The innocence thing might be interesting again if they went down that road, but
they don't go down it.
No.
Because as soon as she kisses someone, she's like, I didn't feel anything. But later, then she's like, Leslie Nielsen, I love you.
Yes.
And it's like, that happens in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. It's just like Weena in Time Machine. Like, it's the same stupid thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to me, there's nothing fun or enjoyable about watching the performances or the story whenever she's on screen. And it's not her fault. Like, she's doing, I think, above and beyond the Call of Duty as far as acting is concerned. But the character exists to be just an object, It's.
Did you find the swimming scene really odd?
Yeah, for a couple reasons, right? Because like the movie's already done a version of what it's doing in that scene, right? Like they put her in like short dresses or skirts or whatever, and then they sort of like, they have her say that line, "What's wrong with my clothes?" She doesn't know, whatever. And then it's like, okay, but then she asked the robot to make her something that is, less revealing. She says like, nothing can show above or below. And then the robot's going to make her this dress that she does eventually put on after swimming around, naked ? But it's not naked because she's wearing like a skin colored suit. It's just like, this is all just a bummer to me. Like all of this is just a bummer. I want to run away. I want to run away from this.
Well, we can run away. Maybe we could talk about something that is good then.
Okay.
Because I agree that the I'll just say the swimming suit thing. It was really clearly trying to set up that she's naked.
Right.
He's like, oh, I didn't bring a bathing suit.
Yeah.
What's a bathing suit?
Yeah.
But then you see her wearing something in there as she's getting out of the water. It made no sense.
It's so weird. It's so weird. Yeah, it's so weird. I would like to lighten the mood with 2 lines of dialogue, Justin.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Because this movie just has lines that are on the face, like, of them, just utterly insane and stupid. The first one I'd like to bring up is the fact that Leslie Nielsen, by the way, this features the screen debut of Leslie Nielsen, who you know from like, The Naked Gun, among other things. He's a really, really good comedic actor.
He changed over the years.
Yeah, he did. And they're presenting him as like the hunky leading man and, whatever. But like his performance is so stodgy. He's so serious. Right. And then he like screams a couple times. I found that kind of interesting just from Leslie Nielsen's a goofball. Not in this.
Right.
And he's also the romantic lead, romantic in quotes or whatever. Anyway, at one point he's disciplining one of his crew members because he's the commander. He's Commander Adams. And he says like, "That's it. I'm going to dock your space pay for 10 months." That's just like, of all the jargon, you couldn't come up with like a name for that currency. It's literally called space pay. Like,
oh, come on, Commander, not my space pay. Take away my Earth pay.
What's the difference between space pay and Earth pay? Because they do still live on Earth, right? Theoretically,
you get space pay faster. It's kind of like direct deposit.
It's like Venmo. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's even quicker.
it goes at the speed of light, and then it has to stand in a beam of light to slow down, and then you get it in your account. Okay. The only other line I wanted to bring up, Justin, was just the fact that Dr. Morbius, who's played by Walter Pidgeon, who's like a very renowned actor. He's in a million things, by the way. He has like 139 IMDb credits, all the way back to silent stuff, to like 1926. Anyway, he's a very very much cast in the role of bringing gravitas. He's got a great voice. He's saying all these professorial things. He's the educated one. He knows about the Krell technology. As the story goes on, you find out he's boosted his IQ, with this machine. Yes. Which I just wanted to say the name of the machine, Justin, and then let you talk about. Maybe we can talk about the whole middle section where they're going through the Krell technology area.
Oh boy, it's fun.
You say fun. And
I'll quantify it.
One of the first things he shows them among, 24 things that he shows them is he calls it the plastic educator.
Yes.
That's what he hooks his brain up to boost his brain juice, Justin.
Yep. He sure does. And before they get in there, I found it was a really fun attempt to do some world building. I don't know, maybe I'm just too critical here. So he opens the door, right? The first Krell door they walk through. The door, yes. And somebody's like, what the heck? This ain't shaped like the one I got at Home Depot. And he's like, well, slow your roll there, Home Slice, because this wasn't built for no humans.
Yeah.
We don't know what the Krell looked like. But apparently they might have looked like a giant triangle or a diamond. it doesn't really make sense because then you go to the plastic educator, and you freaking put the diddly doops on your forehead, and the twirly trops, you like in your cranial area, and it's like, but wait a minute, if they were, because he's like, clearly this was made for someone much larger than me,
of course,
but it's like, wait a minute, you just told me their head comes to a point. I don't know where that would go.
And yet it fits you. Like, what?
It doesn't.
Okay.
There's not. Again, it's like it's trying to really think through those things. Like the script writer, I think, tried to really communicate something.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the disconnect happened if the director went like, this guy can't write for a hill of beans, and then just like was like, okay, make it triangle. I don't know what happened.
Make it
but
triangle.
The result is it doesn't make sense.
That was the red pen on that script draft. It was like, this is good, but make it triangle, and then they redid it.
Well, and I don't know what I mean, I don't know if the writer was like on one or something, but when poor Dr. Morbius gives them like the grand tour of everything Krell. I believe that actually
freaking boring.
Well,
oh my
Travis,
gosh.
I think you'd be interested to know that in the original, like in the first test screening of this, the studio was interested to find out if there was any correlation between the control group of the audience and the group that received Valium while watching this scene. And interestingly, the results were not different between those two groups. So I think that might say something.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, boring is being generous.
Halfway through that sequence, Justin, he says, would you care to see some more of the Krell wonders? And I'm like, please say no. Like, please, for the love.
Turn back now. Hey, do they have like an arcade in here? I'd like to see that, please.
And immediately they're like, yes, we would. And I'm like, please stop. It's like,
so again, it like the coolest thing in there is that you get that very like Death Star kind of aesthetic for some of the sets that they've built, and it still holds up really well, right? Like
it looks
it's clearly
great.
Not a full set, but it looks really good. But it's just exposition after exposition without any real. It's just
none of it makes sense. None of it makes sense. You're talking about the door and what they say about the creatures. I also was super getting twitchy when I was watching this documentary because there are like 5 people in a row in these interviews were like, oh, I thought it was such a brilliant decision to never show the Krell because then your mind fills in the blank spaces. And I'm like, get out of here. That is some serious like nonsense because they say things. They say things like, oh, well, the door's shaped differently, so they must have been shaped strangely, pointy head, whatever, And then you're walking through the Krell technology forever and ever with Dr. Morbius, and he shows them these 2 like screens that are like window. One is a window, one is a mirror. I don't even know. I was totally tuned out to the nonsense. But then I did get this line, Justin, and tell me if you can explain this little gem. Man does not behold the face of the Gorgon and live. What? What is the Gorgon? Like that's what's happening?
Well, that's Greek myth. That right? That reference.
But I'm saying
Travis knows. Okay.
No,
Travis
no.
knows, guys.
I get that. But what the crap is it? What is he talking about? I'm not talking about the reference to the Greek myth. I'm saying what is it paralleled in this room with 2 mirror screen things? What is it?
Yeah, so I'm going to be totally honest with you and give my take on that.
Please.
Is I have no idea and I didn't care enough to try to figure it out.
Because okay, and then I'll ask you this question and I'll let you give a very long-winded answer if you choose to. The Krell are spoken of and slightly described, or at least they're like, we think this. And he says, like, we assume, I have deduced, blah, 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 okay? And then he says the reference to the Gorgon while they're looking in those screens. And it's like, okay, so are we about to see whatever this movie's version of that is? I don't really know. And then later on, when we do see the monster, at least the outline and kind of basic form of the monster, when they're shooting their blasters at it, it's not said to be a Krell being. It's just a monster. Right. And so all of this is just so what is any of that connected, or is it just like nonsense?
I don't think the whole Gorgon and the mirror thing even matters because it's never referenced again. It doesn't come up anymore in the story. So I don't even think our befuddlement there ultimately matters.
It probably doesn't.
I think the creature though that attacks our good space troopers while they were looking for the Taco Bell.
Yes.
That is well, Travis, do you know about Dr. Freud?
Yes, because this movie taught me all I needed to know, Justin.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, I knew we were headed for troubled waters when the second in command got his brain boosted and also busted. Can anyone say aneurysm?
They say
Ouch.
they literally say brain boost, like that's a thing. They're like, if we don't get in there and take that brain boost, we don't know what's gonna happen. I'm like, oh, please stop
It's
saying
so
brain
50s.
boost.
It's bad 50s,
Okay,
right?
so what does he say
Do
after
you need
he-
a brain boost?
What does he say after he melts his brain, Justin? Tell the good
Well, he
people.
lays down on the couch and he says, "They forgot about the subconscious." And It's like,
monsters, John, monsters from the id. And it's like, oh no, please do not do this. And then they do it.
I was really hoping the id was finally like, oh, we're gonna find out something like new and different about the Krell.
Yeah.
And I guess if it was just that the definition, then the movie did meet that definition. We did find something out. However, this is where the whole logic of the movie just implodes on itself, whether or not you've seen the Gorgon. Actually, if you've seen the Gorgon, it's probably better for you because you're dead at that point.
you're dead.
You can't receive any more of this punishment.
Yeah.
But so supposedly, Travis, tell me if our impression is the same.
Okay.
Because what the movie told me and what I understood from the movie is that the Krell became so powerful
Yes.
and immaterial, therefore.
Okay.
Apparently, they could pierce the division between body and soul.
Yeah.
They were able to make themselves non-physical, okay?
Uh-huh.
But somehow that did not, this is so stupid. Somehow this did not erase the reality of their subconscious, which was apparently freed from their immaterial but still around minds. And the subconscious just was kind of like, oh crap, it's on now, and just like murdered everyone, was like, yeah, I'm free, what up, and just like killed everyone in one night.
Yeah.
Is that your understanding of what happened?
I got some of that, and you filled in a couple of the gaps for me, buddy.
Okay.
We have got to land the plane. I cannot.
Okay.
My brain is going to be
here-
melted, and I'm going to see the monsters in the id if we don't.
Okay, here's how we'll land it.
Yeah.
We can come on a good note, but before we get there, I gotta just follow up and say, okay, so the Krell all died, right?
Yeah.
Because their subconscious killed themselves. It's not really clear. Don't
Yeah.
even think about it.
The Krell died because there were budget cuts and they couldn't afford to put them in this movie. That's why the Krell died.
They spent it all on Robbie's suit, and they're like, "Wait a minute, where's Triangle Man?" I'm sorry, we spent that all on Robbie's legs. What? You idiot! I need to give you a brain boost. And
gosh.
it was just not a good day on set. I can tell you that right now.
This is a serious movie, though, guys. This is a serious film.
I don't know if you realize this, but yeah, Anne Francis originally when she went in to get her costume fit, originally it wasn't a miniskirt. It was just this long flowing train.
Yes.
And the train of her robe filled the temple, and the temple of Altair
Come on.
4. And unfortunately.
You're torturing me.
Unfortunately, when they got to shoot on day one, she put it on and went, "What happened to the train in my robe?" And they just pointed at Robbie.
Yep.
Okay, so Dr. Morbius turns out to be the villain because his subconscious is
Yes.
somehow connected to the Krell subconscious, maybe, or maybe it's its own thing.
No, he
So
boosted
he's
his.
the monster?
Okay, let me fix this for you. He boosted his brain so many times that he could make not just little Princess Leia looking versions of things with his mind, but he could conjure up big, scary, killing things. And so the monster is literally his subconscious lashing out at things that he feels threatened by. It's his primitive self, or whatever Freud might phrase it as.
But can you riddle me this, Batman? How come he says, "I want you to stop" to his subconscious,
Yes.
and that kills him? And then the solution is, "Hey, throw that lever over there, Leslie Nielsen." "Okay, I'm going to be in comedies later. I can do this." And
Yeah.
it makes this sound effect like, "Monk." And
Yeah.
he pushes the lever in the floor, and he's like, "Well, that did it. This whole planet's going to blow up. It's time for you to leave."
I don't have
What
an
is
answer.
this movie?
No, I don't have an answer for you. I really don't. All I have to say is we need to answer one more question, and the question is, is it worth your time? You go first, big boy. I can't. I
Well-
gotta gather my thoughts. I got too many brain boosts from that conversation.
Oh crap, dude! I don't want you to die, or you're gonna come back and be like, "Well, I made this robot that will co-host with you, lesser life form now."
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie is it really is for, I think, the audience is people that are really curious about film history and like how did we get where we are today, especially if you're interested in visuals and practical effects or animation, blah 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 blah. This movie is setting kind of the record, right? This movie is the shoulders this metaphor is breaking down quickly. But anyway, the idea is this movie equals a person, and George Lucas stood on the shoulders of that person and did some other cool stuff. That's the best we can say for this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Robbie's kind of fun. He's the most fun thing in this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Except you also have a cook called Cookie that is like addicted to whiskey, even though he hasn't had any in like a year.
And it
except
doesn't
he
give
has
you a
little bit.
hangover for some reason.
It's not natural,
Yeah.
he says.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, if you're really interested in the visual kind of side of Hollywood and wow, how did we get from like, doing really ridiculous like still shots to where we are today?
Yeah.
This movie is a really important stepping stone in that regard.
How often would you rewatch this, Justin?
In all other regards, you can step over this movie. So I would never rewatch this.
No.
Because I've seen it now, and it's like, get me out of here. I want to be 100 million miles away from this movie, like they are from El Toro 4 when it explodes.
Yep. I would only add, this is like you said, like undeniably significant movie in what it did with visuals and stuff. I did think, here's the real answer from me. Watch the 20-minute documentary. Don't watch the movie, because everything that matters, like visually, that is going to be like sort of put on a platter before you. Like, look at this. They did this first, right? It's in the 20-minute documentary. And then you don't have to watch any of the nonsense that's totally alternating between boring and, a feminist manifesto of sorts, if you will. I think,
If you will.
yeah.
I did like the part where Leslie Nielsen puts on the bikini. That was very ahead of its time.
My brain is boosted, Justin. I'm going to have an aneurysm. I just want to say one last thing, which is at probably 40 plus minutes in, I checked the runtime of this thing like every 10 minutes after that. It is a slog of a movie. Not a lot actually happens. There's only a couple like quote unquote action set pieces in the whole thing. It's dull. And it's dull in a way that is annoying because it's got this bing, bong, bing, bong, like music happening, not music, sound stuff happening. And then yet, Justin, when you get to that third act and they're running from the invisible monster that he has to tell to stop and then he dies for some reason, they're throwing in lines like, we're all monsters in our subconscious, so we have laws and religion. And then the whole movie ends with him embracing this Altera character, like they're going to be fine forever, everything's great. And he just says, it will remind us that we are, after all, not God. And I'm like, I am more and more in my older age. I'm not old relative to lots of people on this planet, but I've seen a lot of movies at this point. And what I think, Justin, maybe annoys me more than anything else is not earning the right to your grand statements. And so I think back to Frankenstein and things like that, where it's like you just stay a popcorn flick and embrace the dumb. And this movie so aggressively goes in the other direction. It's like, we know the director said to everyone, this is a serious film. You can see that everyone's giving a serious performance in a movie that is inherently stupider than it thinks it is. And so I do not think the movie is worth your time. I think the 20-minute documentary that tells you why the visuals are significant is worth your time. I will never rewatch this. And that's all I have to say about that. I need to get in the spaceship, Justin, and get the crap out of here. All right. Well, the beep boops, Justin, they're fading away and fading away.
Fading fast.
Yes.
Hopefully never to be heard or seen again.
Yeah, that would be great. Next week, funnily enough, we do have a proper Shakespeare adaptation by, I think, a filmmaker who knows what he's doing a little bit more in that department than what we watched this week. It is Throne of Blood by Akira Kurosawa.
It'll be a good palate cleanser, I think, Travis.
It will. And we will have a palate cleansing buddy named Annie with us.
Yes.
Come on back next week and listen in, folks. Bye.
Pew pew.
Let the movie speak.
Our radar just picked up something.
Where away?
At the head of the arroyo.
Moving?
This way, sir, slowly. Automatic control. Batteries. Fire.